Hello and welcome to DailyO. This is in our good books section. We welcome all our viewers and readers to a very, very special interaction today. We're here with Mr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Tharoor, if I may, who is, of course, an extremely well-known Congress leader, one of the leading voices we hear in Parliament, and in his own right, a man of letters, a man of words, as we're often reminded, and a man of great erudition, who has just written his latest book called The Paradoxical Prime Minister Narendra Modi and His India, brought out by Aleph Books. It's a fabulous book, Dr. Tharoor. Many congratulations, quite a feat. First and foremost, to get straight into the book, why do you call Narendra Modi a paradoxical Prime Minister?
Well, it actually goes back to the very start of his innings, as it were, as Prime Minister. He made a number of speeches around the latter stages of the election campaign and soon after being elected, in which he talked about being a Prime Minister for all Indians. He talked about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and all of that. And this inclusive messaging and this liberal messaging, including on economic policy, foreign policy, all sorts of things, was actually quite encouraging to those of us who feared the worst after the kind of unsavory reputation he had developed after the Gujarat riots of 2002. The Narendra Modi of 2014 had clearly inspired enough support to become Prime Minister. And I felt that I needed to show enough respect to the electorate by taking him at his word and giving him, in the initial stages, the benefit of the doubt. So I wrote an article saying, is there a Narendra Modi 2.0? I did go on to say in the same article that it's too early to tell, and we'll have to watch him by the yardsticks of what he says. Right. But that got left out in all the outraged paraphrasing of what I said, accusing me of having surrendered to Mr. Modi. I hadn't. I had said these things are good and we should applaud them. Let's hope he lives up to them. Well, he didn't. And within 6 months, I had actually published a book of essays called India Shastra by Aleph, and in the introduction to which I said, here's the contradiction. Here is a contradiction that we see with Mr. Modi, that his liberal pronouncements are all very impressive, but he rests for political support on the most illiberal elements of Indian society and politics. Right. And I said that in this contradiction lie the seeds of what I fear will be his future failure. Right. And I'm sorry to say that he spent 4.5 years proving me right, which is why I begin this book with the words, I told you so. Yeah. Because it's there in black and white, published in December 2014, that I did tell the Indian public so. Now, having said that, let me stress that that the book is not just, the opposition congressman's sort of attack on the BJP.
It isn't what you call an exercise in Flossinau Cine Hilly-pilification?
That's correct. It's not an exercise. It's not merely an exercise in floxinosi nihilipilification. Right. It is also an exercise in substantiating with some depth, some research, hundreds of footnotes, a very coherent argument, measuring Mr. Modi against his own yardsticks of what he has done, what he has claimed to do, and what he's claimed he intends to do, against what he's actually achieved or not achieved. And it's therefore a rather comprehensive but substantiated takedown of the 4.5 years of Mr. Modi. So the paradoxes, that is a central paradox, but it's not the only one. Literally, I was talking to a friend, we came up with about 18 paradoxes in 2 minutes. And I think we should have a contest, on the net to encourage people to come up with paradoxes of their own and give a signed book to the best 5 or something. Because honestly, there are so many. One obvious one, for example, is here is the most eloquent orator in Hindi in the history, perhaps, of independent democratic India, who is startlingly silent when his fellow citizens are attacked, stripped, lynched, killed, hanged, and otherwise abused, and the Prime Minister of India, no less, says nothing. And this kind of thing is a complete paradox. How can a man who is ready with the perfect word for the perfect occasion, mellifluous oratory at the drop of a hat, fail to find words to condole the grief of his fellow citizens?
Right. We will get into all of those paradoxes, including from the opposition party as well, because that too is a constant shadow in this book. But I do want to ask you about something that you wrote. You have actually drawn a portrait of the Prime Minister, which is unusual, because you look into his public pronouncements, you look into his public persona. You also talk about the personal interactions you've had with him. On page 85, you talk about a sense of resentment and deprivation deprivation that you seemed to sense from him in the way he talked to you, apparently, about how the political elites, the social elites of India would never accept a person like him as Prime Minister, no matter what he did. Tell us a little bit about this sense of deprivation and resentment that you write off.
Yeah, it was actually quite striking because, I don't think I've quoted him as saying anything that he would be ashamed of or embarrassed of having said, because, we're not intimate friends. What he said to me are things I'm sure that he would be willing to say to others. But he said to me in an unguarded moment, that there are some parts of India where a lower caste man growing a moustache or riding a horse attracts attacks and stones and so on from upper caste people. That is what is happening to me in Indian politics. And I found that a very striking observation. I don't think I reported it as a negative judgment. No. I just said this is something that clearly Mr. Modi genuinely feels. He expressed it as part of his genuine feeling. And to my mind, it's worth thinking about, because obviously politics is about democracy. I think that in many ways, Congress can be proud of the fact that somebody who at one stage of his life was really a chaiwala's assistant has become the Prime Minister of India. That is, we have created a democracy that makes it possible for the humblest Indian from the most difficult circumstances to rise to the very top of power. So that, to my mind, is actually a great advertisement for our democracy. There is no reason to sneer at somebody. But equally, it is rather surprising that a man so overtly self-confident as Mr. Modi should express this sense of resentment. It surprises me.
Okay. You spoke about the Congress having created democratic conditions which are actually very empowering, and that's something to be proud of, undoubtedly. You talk about paradoxes through this magnificent book. Now, to come to the paradox of the Congress party itself, at one point you talk about, having a liberal, the paradox of seeming liberal but not being so. Now, many people could argue that while you're applying those words to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they apply as equally to the Congress party, particularly to its leader, Rahul Gandhi, who, while seeming liberal, has been very, very quiet on issues such as Section 377, such as the Sabrimala conflict. Why are we not seeing the Congress party actually put its money, where its mouth is, and take a liberal, progressive stand, rather than just sitting on the sidelines and watching civil society having to battle out these very, very important issues?
Actually, I'm not sure you're being fair at all. I think certainly from what I understand, Rahul Gandhi has taken a very clear stand on Section 377 before the Supreme Court judgment, as well as welcomed it when it came. On most issues, he has been quite willing to support. In fact, at the time that I introduced my private member's bill on Section 377, we had an internal Congress party meeting of MPs in which I raised my intention to do so later in the day. And Sonia Gandhi was then the Congress president. She openly said, I support this and I want you all to support Shashi in doing this. And Rahul ji was present and said the same thing. So I don't think there's been any attempt to pussyfoot this issue.
Sabrimala?
On Sabrimala, I think the National Party took a very clear stand, including Rahul Gandhi himself. But there has been a sort of massive blowback locally, which has meant that the local party stand has differed. And I think as a democratic party, the Congress felt, as indeed the BJP also felt. It's very striking that the BJP and the RSS also welcomed the Supreme Court judgment initially and then changed around, that their duty lay with the voters and not with the principles. Now, one can regret all of this, but when you touch on issues of faith, it becomes incredibly sensitive in the Indian context. I mean, you saw the nonsense that was made out of my perfectly normal observation that while most good Hindus would like to see a Ram temple at the place they believe to be the birthplace of Ram, that most good Hindus would not have wanted to do that by demolishing somebody else's place of worship, which actually had been said by Vajpayee Sahab and Advani Sahab at the time and in the years afterwards. So it's not as if I was saying anything that had never been said before. And yet you remember the hue and cry that was made, because people, political opportunists, know which issues are most sensitive to stir up emotions. And when you are in a political environment where you want to say Rafale scam, 390 rupees gas cylinder has become 970. 3 rupees 92%, 3 rupees 92 paise tax on 1 litre of petrol has become 19 rupees 48 paise under the BJP. So all of these things you want to say, their answer is Ram Temple, Sabrimala, Ayodhya, 377. The whole idea is to touch on emotional hot button issues and get voters to act and react on the basis of emotion
Dr. Tharoor,
rather than their self-interest.
Dr. Tharoor, what about the blasphemy law that's about to be, proposed in Punjab? That's under a Congress government which claims to be liberal. You're talking about, you flayed the Prime Minister for not standing up to liberal values. Where's the Congress on this?
We are the Democratic Party of multiple voices. I have said clearly on social media at the time that I don't happen to agree with this. There are other congressmen who also said this was an unfortunate step. But who are we to second guess what the Punjab Chief Minister and his cabinet think is necessary in Punjab? Apparently this proposal had the unanimous support of all parties in the Punjab Assembly. It will then have to face the question of the assent of the president, and then they'll have to face undoubtedly a court test, because I'm quite sure that somebody will go to the Supreme Court arguing that this is unconstitutional, and we'll have to see what the courts determine. But the fact is that in a democracy there are processes, and we have to respect the processes. I'm not an MLA in Punjab, so how on earth do I have a right sitting in Kerala, in Thiruvananthapuram, to play a meaningful role in sorting this out? I mean, Mr. Captain Amrinder Singh and his cabinet know what the people of Punjab want. They've got unanimous support from their assembly. Now let's see how whether the law comes into force, whether it's assented to by the president, and whether indeed the Supreme Court considers it to be constitutional.
Okay. Now, you've talked about the Prime Minister's achievements in particular areas. You've talked about his failures in certain other areas. Foreign policy is something that comes out very strongly in your book. I would argue, though, that his supporters do say we are now in a stronger position vis-a-vis America, we're in a stronger position vis-a-vis the EU, we're in a stronger position vis-a-vis the rest of Asia minus China, we're in a stronger position even with Bangladesh today than we were earlier. This is, of course, prior the NRC exercise began. What would you say to that? Why do we have this dismal sort of picture of foreign relations under Prime Minister Modi?
Because for the arguments I've given facts, and for their claims, there are not a shred of evidence in support of that. How is our position stronger with the US? Is there evidence that the US has gone out of its way to oblige us on H-1B visas, which affect 90% Indians? No. On the contrary, they've taken a negative direction. Is there any evidence that they have given us any particular waivers when it comes, for example, to our right to buy Russian equipment? So far, we don't know. The president made a rather threatening statement. India will find out soon enough. Have they given us a waiver on the Iran oil issue? Again, we don't know. So unless there is concrete evidence to point to that this government is able to get things out of America that UPA could not, but UPA actually could. We got a waiver when UPA was in power on the Iran sanctions at that time. Excuse me, we got a technology waiver, we got the Indo-US nuclear deal. The Modi government has nothing to compare to any of those achievements. You take any other country, show me one country where the Modi government has done better than the UPA. You mentioned Bangladesh. It's the contrary. In fact, Bangladesh, it was the UPA government that, with Sheikh Hasina coming to power and India's very adroit diplomacy at that time, when there was a contested election that the US and UK attacked Sheikh Hasina for, our strong support for her at that time is what gave us the friendly relations that resulted in terrorists being attacked in Bangladesh and given to India and so on. Our efforts on the Teesta waters, our efforts on the enclaves were blocked by the BJP at the time. It's another matter that after the BJP came to power, they reversed their position and supported the enclave adjustment of the border. But that was something that UPA had tried to do earlier and had failed because of the BJP, whereas we cooperated in the national interest. I don't see a single example of something the BJP has done with Bangladesh that is better than it happened under the UPA.
Right. Okay. We're getting a signal.
We've got, by comparison, Maldives. We've been completely mismanaging that relationship. And if it were not for the saving grace of the Maldives electorate now turfing out the government there, we had lost everything. We had lost contracts. We had lost companies being kicked out. We had people advertising jobs even in the resorts of the Maldives with a sign saying Indians need not apply. That's how bad things had become. So there's an example, the tiniest country in our neighborhood, and this so-called, masculinist, robust, strong government of Mr. Modi had proved completely ineffective. So my question is, what is the evidence for the claims you've just summarized?
Right. I do want to ask you about Pakistan. You write about Imran Khan. You know him as well. You write about him in the book. There's another paradox there because you yourself clearly lay out the difficulties of being able to speak to someone like Imran Khan. What would you advise Prime Minister Modi to actually do with Imran Khan?
No, my answer would clearly be, let's take him at his word and stop, pursuing talks with him if he proves unable to keep his word. See, the thing is, we haven't given him the benefit of the doubt. He says, I'm elected, I'm pro-peace, I want to talk to you all. My foreign minister is coming to New York, please meet him there. through your foreign minister. Our government immediately says yes, which I believe was the right answer. 24 hours later, somebody has a rethink in the BJP and they come up with somewhat specious excuses and cancel the talks. My answer to Narendra Modi would have been, when you have a new chapter being opened in Pakistan, take them at their word, and the moment they let you down, which many governments have done in the past, you then say, here's a reason. But they haven't seriously let you down. The excuses you gave...
What about Uri?
No, but that was not Imran Khan.
All right. Okay.
So the point is, Imran Khan came to power at the end of July.
Right.
You know, what has happened since then? There have been a couple of unpleasant incidents on the border, but those happen all the time and have happened, even in the past when there were decent, good relations. But what we haven't tested him doing is whether, because of his clout with the military, or rather the military's influence on him, vice versa, whether as a result he could be the acceptable face of a new policy by the Pakistan military.
Okay.
Well, we haven't given him a chance to show it.
Okay.
And as a result, things are already very unpleasant with invective flying on both sides. My concern with the Pakistan policy is inconsistency. I've written a piece subsequent to the book going to press saying, does Mr. Modi have a Pakistan policy?
Right.
And I think my worry is it doesn't seem to have one. I mean, there have been more ups and downs than a kid's yo-yo with, shari soul diplomacy, artillery exchanges, no chicken biryani, followed by Sharif coming to the swearing in. Example of it, cancel a thing with Hurriyat, meet them in Bangkok where there is no Hurriyat. I mean, it's crazy. Ostentatiously ignore the Prime Minister in Kathmandu at the SARC meeting, quietly meet him in Sergeant Jindal's hotel room. What's going on? Does he know what he wants? Can he please confide in the nation as to what his vision is? He has not done so.
Can you please tell us why he did demonetization? You've written about it in great detail. What is your reading about why Prime Minister Modi actually did this?
I think, frankly, that no good explanation will suffice. Because any objective explanation, all the reasons he gave turned out to be false. In any case, none of them were fulfilled. In other words, counterfeit money wasn't stopped, black money didn't come back, terrorists didn't end up being deprived of funding. All of those things have been falsified. He didn't give the economy a boost. On the contrary, he cost the economy 2% growth. He cost large numbers of jobs. We don't have exact estimates, but various figures I've given in the book by various employer organizations. Small and micro enterprises received a fatal setback. It was a disastrous decision. The only credible explanation people have is that this was a decision taken without consultation with any economic expert. And it was done very much with the short-term gains of the UP elections to deprive opposition parties of any unaccounted money they may have in those notes. That seems to have been, but to destroy an entire country's economy to win one state assembly is unforgivable.
Right. Final question, and then we'll wrap up. You're so famous for your use of words. Tell us one word, not paradoxical, in which you would describe Prime Minister Modi, and one word in which you would describe Rahul Gandhi.
Well, I think the Prime Minister is inconsistent. I think that's very very clear. And if I have to choose one word for Rahul Gandhi, it would be inclusive. He really tries to take people along with him. And that's something that I like very much, which is not there in Mr. Modi, unfortunately.
All right. Okay. We'll stop at that note. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. Congratulations on this fantastic book, The Paradoxical Prime Minister. Very good reading for anybody who's interested in contemporary politics. Thank you so much, Dr. Tharoor. A great pleasure to have you with us at DailyO. Thank you so much for joining us, viewers. We'll be back with more books, more politics, and many more interesting interviews for you at DailyO.